everybody, welcome back to Pagan's Witchy Corner. My name is Pagan, and today I'm joined by a very awesome author whose book I absolutely adored, and that is George Lizos, who wrote The Secrets of Greek Mysticism, and we're going to talk all about the book and how fantastic it was. But George, welcome to the show.
Hi, Pagan. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for reading my book.
I loved your book. It was such a wonderful, fresh take on obviously Greek mythology and Greek mysticism and the different takes and practices that kind of come along with that. There's a million and one books out there about Greek mythology and the practices within them, but yours was such a, I would say, modern kind of fresh take to a ancient practice, which was really wonderful, and I loved the book. I also loved that you read the book for your audiobook because it was so nice hearing your voice and being able to listen to that as well. So if everyone who's listening, if you're somebody who likes audiobooks, the audiobook is spectacular. The written book is also spectacular. Whichever you prefer, go pick up a copy. Always, as I always say, the link will be in the show description, so make sure you check that out. But yeah, let's talk about the book. Obviously you have a few other spiritual books out as well. But what made you
Yeah.
decide to write this one specifically?
So in 2017, that's when I essentially transitioned to Hellenic Polytheism as a result of a spiritual awakening that I had. I was living in London at the time, working a full-time job while at the same time building my spiritual business part-time. And for people who run their own spiritual businesses or any business while they're still working a full-time job, they understand how hard it is to do it all. So I was basically exhausting myself, working a 9 to 5 job and coming home, working up until midnight, going to sleep, repeating it the whole day. Until one day I woke up intending to go to work, but my body just wouldn't function. I had burned myself out to that point that I exhausted my body. So I stayed home that day and I realized something had to change. So I headed for the magical town of Glastonbury in the UK, which is a very new agey pagan kind of town. And I did a past life regression. And in that regression, I saw myself in a past life being a prostitute who ended up getting pregnant with one of the clients. And when the client found out, he stabbed me in the womb, killing the baby.
Oh my
So that,
gosh.
yeah, I know, right? So in that moment, that I created this karmic vow of rejecting my feminine energy and abusing my masculine energy, because that's what that essentially reenacting my trauma over and over again. So lifetime after lifetime, I was doing that. In this specific lifetime, I almost took my own life when I was 15 years old because I couldn't accept being gay, hence my feminine energy. And then later on in life, after I healed all that, I was slowly killing myself by overworking myself and therefore not taking any feminine time to rest and abusing my masculine energy. So I get out of the past life regression, tears running down my cheeks, and I see opposite across the street, it was the goddess temple of Glastonbury. So I rush into the temple and I find one of the priestesses and I'm like, I need to connect with the divine feminine. Can you help me? And she told me all about the Celtic goddesses. And then I'm like, you know what? I love the Celtic goddesses, but I'm not a Celt.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I am Greek. I wonder if I can find the equivalent. So I go back to my Airbnb, I search online, and I realize that was the year 2017 that the Greek government officially recognized Hellenic polytheism as an official proper religion. And they were the Greek polytheists in Athens, they were doing their first ever priesthood training. So in that moment, I booked my ticket, I went to Athens, and I became the first ordained priest in my home island of Cyprus. And I have been practicing ever since at the Temple of Zeus that we have here in Cyprus. So to cut a long story short, what caused me to write that book, I realized that there weren't any English books out there about the Greek god and goddesses, teaching about them from a theological, not a mythological perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You see, in the beginning, you said it's a mythological book, but it's not. It's a theological book. And that's exactly why I chose to write it, because there are no other books like that out there.
I love that. And I love that it's a different perspective on that. And I'm so sorry that you did that to yourself to, feel that you had to. I mean, obviously, it was a good thing that you ended up doing it, but also at the same time, it's like, I'm
Yeah.
so sorry that you had to go through that struggle to get to that point. But the gods have to work with us in our strange ways to make us, see what we need to see to end up where we need to end up. But yeah,
Exactly.
it's still such a sad story. And also, your past
You
life
know what,
story was
Megan?
heartbreaking.
Yeah. You know what? I've trained myself by this point that whenever something negative happens, quote unquote, something negative happens in my life, although I'm going through it, like my ego experiences the pain and the hurt,
Hmm.
etc. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking that's a chapter in a book.
I mean, true. Yes, that is very true.
So I'm like, that's my way of finding the silver lining.
That is a very great way to look at that as well. So obviously, you talk about many different gods and goddesses within your book. What is some of the differences that you would kind of like to touch on in terms of how obviously we all have read Greek mythology throughout school and learning and growing up, but what is the differences between learning about that and the actual practices and the differences of those gods?
Yes. So first of all, let's define the difference between mythology and theology.
Perfect.
So theology is basically religion. It's the ancient Greek religion. So the way the gods were portrayed in myths is different from how they were venerated as gods and goddesses in a practicing religion. Mythology draws from theology, but not the other way around. The myths, they were created by deeply spiritual people in mystery schools primarily to capture the essence of the gods and goddesses in allegorical, symbolic ways. And they were not to be taken like at face value. You were
Hmm.
supposed to know, for example, what each element symbolized. So whereas in the myths we have gods that fight one another, they're jealous, etc. These are not the characteristics of the gods. The gods are loving and pure. So, who the gods really are, they are universal laws and functions, the embodiment of universal laws and functions. They're not just archetypes, they're not just energies, they are universal laws and functions. For example, Aphrodite, she is the goddess of the law of form, the creation. She gives form to things. That's why in Cyprus, one of her epithets was Aphrodite Morpho, which means that she who gives form to things. And therefore, when we think about the gods and goddesses, Ares, the god of war, he's not really the god of war, he's a god of courage and bravery.
Hmm.
He's the god that teaches us that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is fight. Because what if you're getting attacked in the middle of the street and someone is trying to mug you? Are you gonna send them love and light? No.
No.
You're gonna you're gonna fight back. You're gonna protect yourself. So sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to fight. So when we see beyond the myths, we find the essence of the gods, and that's the aim of the book. Yes, I do mention myths, but I go into the detail of explaining what each myth is all about and what the essence and the virtues of the gods are that we can use to embody in our lives.
I think that that's a really great kind of outlook. And it's also something that a lot of times, I think, in terms of paganism and when we are all starting out in that walk, whatever walk you choose, whether it be Hellenic paganism or Celtic or Norse or any of the others, because there's many, um,
Yes.
whatever branch you choose, understanding the differences between that. But I think sometimes the mythology is also a really great gateway into that and helps you give that kind of basis of understanding. But then you end up being able to take that and connect with that divine being, whoever they may be, and are allowing yourself to grow and form that relationship, whatever it may be for you as the individual. And that's where in my opinion, it separates from the obviously mythos side of it into the, you know, personal gnosis sides of it. So
Yes. The myths are a starting point. They help you get a glimpse of who the gods are, understand their energy, their essence. And then when you're ready to go deeper, of course, you can learn more by reading more, but you can also learn more by experiencing more. When you start having a relationship with the gods, either through altars, either through ritual, either through other embodiment practices.
yes, absolutely. So, kind of in your opinion, obviously there's multitudes of pantheons, which we just mentioned, but kind of
Mhm.
how would you view the Greek? gods and goddesses and their terms of how they would branch out into other religions.
Ooh, I love that. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about syncretism, which is blending different pagan religions and different spiritual practices, like ancient New Ageism, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go back to the ancient times, the pagan religions, all the different pantheons, they were not dogmatic. They were accepting of other religions. They were respecting other religions because they understood that pagan religions, they were based upon people's relationship with the earth. So there are two essentially types of religions: founded religions and natural religions.
Yes.
Pagan religions are natural religions. They were based on people's relationship with the earth and the universe. Whereas founded religions, they were created by a single person claiming that they are God or they know God.
Mm-hmm.
So syncretism was something that happened naturally. Therefore, all the gods and goddesses of all the pantheons were related to one another. Right now, I just came back from a 4-day summer solstice conference in Greece where we partnered up with Italian polytheists
Oh, that's
practicing the
interesting.
exactly. And there was a person also who came from the Hindu religion. And we did ritual together. So we honored Apollo and the summer solstice, and they honored Apollo and the summer solstice in their own way through their own deities. Of course, the Greeks and the Romans are they're very related to the
Mm-hmm.
Italian and the Hellenic pantheons. The Hindu ones, for example, weren't, but he was able to come in and associate and bring in mantras and gods and goddesses related to that. So because the gods and goddesses are universal laws, their universal laws are universal. It's just a matter of how did people socialize them and talk about them and name them and how do they worship and practice with them. And therefore, it's all interconnected.
I think that that's wonderful, and that had to have been such a fascinating experience to see. Obviously, Greek and Roman are very similar, like you were saying, but bringing in the Hindu, wow, I bet that was just a wonderful experience to even just be
Yes.
a part
And
of.
you know what? So this guy, he's a president of ICCS, the International Committee, I think it's
Mhm.
Committee of Cultural Studies. Yes. So it's basically an event held every 3 years or 4 years, I think, globally, where all the elders from all the world's indigenous religions gather together to support each other and share. So this is proof that all indigenous ethnic religions are interconnected, essentially.
And that is such a wonderful message that obviously it should be shared amongst everyone, and everyone's experiences are valid no matter what walk of life you come from. And God, that's so cool. I love that. That's so amazing.
Yes. Oh, and to correct the name, is the International Center of Cultural Studies. That's what
Okay.
it is. ICCS.
Yes, that still is absolutely amazing. And that is such a cool experience. And so, if anybody is interested in looking into that, obviously, since it happens every 3 to 4 years and it just happens, so you're going to have to wait a little bit. But
Yeah.
kind of keep that on your radar. Maybe that's something you'll eventually want
Yeah.
to go to. So, there you go. Now, obviously, what would you kind of like to say in terms of who would be your go-to kind of god and goddess, god or goddess, I should say, that would be
Yes.
the one that would be like, they're my everyday go-to. This is who I would like to, implement my work with. This is who I go
Yeah.
to for X, Y, and Z reason. If you got a list of them, great. If you got a singular one, even better. But whatever you would like to kind of answer that with, I would love to know who your kind of primary focus is.
I will, yes. So I want to preface this by saying that we all have a patron god or goddess, like a guardian god or
Of
goddess.
course, yes.
And I have, as you've seen in the book, I have a meditation to help people like meet them. However, I also have a free workshop that anybody can access. And they can go to GreekMysticism.com and you can access a free workshop to meet your patron god and goddess. But mine is Apollo. And basically, who our patron god and goddess is, he's the god or goddess that has a frequency and the life lessons that we need to grow on our soul's journey of ascension.
Yes.
So they are the guide, not just in this lifetime, but over many lifetimes. And for me, it's Apollo because it's all about harmony. He's multifaceted. He's all about bringing in the light. I'm a Leo as well, so I'm all about the sun. So it makes perfect sense that Apollo came to me and I felt such a kinship with him. I went to Delphi a couple of times and really felt like uh, um, connected to him. But also, I worked a lot with Aphrodite, who was, according to myth, born in my home island of Cyprus, and we were the biggest cult, ancient cult of Aphrodite, where we did the Aphrodisia festival every single year, and the Aphrodite birthplace is based here in Cyprus. So I worked with her as well a lot during my life to like help open up my heart, heal sexual trauma, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Which it's a good point to mention that although we may have a patron god or goddess, there are other gods and goddesses we may work with throughout our lives, depending on the lessons that we're here to learn.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that that's wonderful. I recently had such a fun experience with Aphrodite, and I don't work with anyone in the Greek pantheon except for Hades and Persephone, but
Yes.
it was very interesting because I had no drive to work with Aphrodite. She just kind of showed up, and I was working on a fiction project with one of my co-authors that I write with, and we were putting out a new book, and that was based in Greek mythos, and especially the
Yes.
mythology of the various, I guess you could call them monsters, but the various creatures throughout the that kind of thing. And Aphrodite made this appearance within the writing, and I'm not somebody who will make notes in terms of writing. I just kind of go with the flow and see where I end up and then go back and fix what I need to. She
Mhm.
made this wonderful appearance that she was going to be the patron deity of this story and of the blessing and the union between the two main characters. And I'm like, I don't know if that's fiction. I'm not sure if it is. And it was very interesting because I was in the middle of writing and we were working on the cover design as well. And I noticed that one of her offerings is roses. And I told the cover designer there has to be roses on the cover. And I didn't know why. I was just like, yeah, I want roses on there. And I had no idea why. Well, turns out that's one of her offerings as well. And then, of course, I had to make a plea to her in within the story, and it just worked out very interesting. And we were just about getting ready to send it off for publishing. And then before I did, it's like, you need to put a dedication to Aphrodite in this because the story wouldn't exist without her and it won't sell without her. And I'm like, that seems oddly specific. I'm not sure. I'm not saying no, but that's very oddly specific. Okay, I did. And this book has been so well received by so many people. And it's such a crazy experience that I'm just like, did you sneak into my writing, Miss Ma'am? Really? Is that what happened here?
Yeah,
And
she did.
she did. And everyone I've talked to that has worked with Aphrodite, they're like, yeah, that's what she does. That's exactly how she does it.
You know what I love about Aphrodite is that she owns it. Like I love working with her. Now in the book, I have mantras for each god, like a
Yes.
single sentence essentially that describes the god or goddess. And for Aphrodite, I embrace all expressions of love because she's unapologetic about who she is. Usually, especially in the wider New Age community, when we think about source, our gods and goddesses, we think about love and light, love and light, love and light. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, that's celestial love, the spiritual love. It's important, but it's just one expression of love.
Right.
Aphrodite teaches us to embrace sensual love, sexual love, flirtatious love, self love. There's so many different types of expressions of love, and you need to be so unapologetic about it to do so. And you can see that in her statues and in her iconography throughout the years. Yes, we see the statue there, the famous Botticelli one, the Venus,
Mm-hmm.
where she's like she's coming out of the sea with like the shell, and she see her she's naked, she's owning it. If you go further back in time in the ancient Greek times, because that's Roman, when you go to the Greek times, you see her sometimes she's modest, sometimes she's naked, sometimes she's posing very seductively, sometimes she isn't. There is one specific statue of Aphrodite when she's like on her knees with her knees like wide open,
Mm-hmm.
like she's owning it. So that is the assertive energy that she has that she clearly used to get into your book.
Right. It was such a crazy experience too because obviously I was telling my writing partner about it and I was like, I don't know if I'm just putting this in for fiction because, like, obviously we're talking about a romance between two characters that shouldn't really have a romance, and that this union should be blessed and all this. And I was like, this doesn't feel like fiction. This feels more like something else, like something spiritual.
Yeah.
And of course, he asked me, he's like, are you sure you didn't make a plea to Aphrodite? And I said, I don't work with her at all. Like,
Oh,
she's not even on my radar.
here's the thing, though. That's a very interesting point. You say, I don't work with her. I only work with Hades and Persephone. But
Hmm.
in truth, you do work with her. And you work with all the gods and goddesses because if you think about it, it's like you're telling me, I don't work with the law of gravity. I don't like the law of gravity because
True.
the gods
Very
and
true.
goddesses are universal laws. So each time you create something, you're working with Aphrodite. Each time you witness a bee pollinating a flower, you encounter Aphrodite. Each time you see the waves crashing on the beach, that's Aphrodite. Each time you have sex, that's Aphrodite, because she is in every form of creation. She's the mingling of opposing forms that creates something new. So, in this sense, we all work with all the gods and goddesses. We just don't name them in that specific way, for example, like you do with Hades and
Hmm.
Persephone.
Yes. Wow. I love when I can come into a podcast interview and get taught some really wonderful things. And this is one of those moments where I'm like, huh, well, apparently I have some work to do now.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm someone who says I don't work with Hades.
Mhm.
So clearly, I need to hear this lesson as well.
And it's so funny when you hear somebody that's like, "Oh, I don't work with Hades," and it's like, "Oh, you work with Hades," and it's like, "Are you sure about that?" And it's funny because he is probably one of the most gentle deities I've come across in quite a long time. He's very gentle in the way he's assertive, but he is very gentle in the way that he does it. He has such a wonderful experience with him, and I spoke with Jamie Wagner, who wrote the book Hades. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend. But she was basically saying the same thing, that he can be very assertive, but he can also be so gentle and so wonderful in the way that he comes to you, in the way that he speaks with you and works with you. And even though it's not necessarily always about working with the dead or working with the underworld energies, sometimes it's about knowing yourself and knowing the darker energies within yourself and being able to work with
Yes.
them. And he does it in a way that doesn't stir up the trauma and doesn't hurt. And he's so
Yes.
gentle about it. But he is also like, yeah, this is not okay what you're doing here. You need to work past this and let's find this path. And it's not so
Yes.
much of like, hey, this is going to hurt really bad. I'm going to drag you kicking and screaming through the mud, to make you work through this. It's more like, nope, let's just inch a little bit this way, a little more, a little more. Now you're on the right
Yeah.
path. Now you can walk. Now you're okay. And he's
I,
very
I've
wonderful about
learned
it.
I've learned to love working with Hades. And I want to share something because usually in the witchcraft community, the perception of Hades is taken primarily from the Greek magical papyri. Because
Hmm.
I'm studying the magical papyri right now and I can see the mentions there. So he's associated with like witchcraft. However, let's go back to like the ancient times because the Greek magical papyri, they are in the later antiquity when there was a lot of syncretism with Egypt, etc. So there was like new content coming through. When you go all the way back, you see with myth that Hades is one of the three sons of Kronos.
Hmm.
The first one is Zeus, then we have Poseidon, and then we have Hades
Yes.
or Pluto, because that's another name. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the names. So what's interesting here is that okay, that's the myth. They are the three sons, but let's go beyond the myth and analyze the symbolism. So Zeus is so basically, the three sons took one third of the world. So the sky was given to Zeus, the sea was given to Poseidon, and the underworld was given to Hades. Now
Hmm.
let's analyze what these are from a spiritual perspective. Zeus took the sky that represents the higher planes of consciousness, and therefore the place of ascension where we go as our soul evolves. Then
Hmm.
we have Poseidon, the sea, who rules over the earth, sorry, the intermediary plane of consciousness where souls go after death. And then Pluto rules over the underworld, which really is the earthly plane of consciousness. So essentially, the underworld is the earth,
Yes.
like where we live right now,
Yes.
because we are physical human beings and we're here to live this incarnation so we can learn lessons and evolve. And Hades slash Pluto is responsible for us being here on Earth and living a prosperous, healthy, wealthy life. That's why he's also Pluto, like the giver of wealth. That's why he's also Evuleus, the good counselor, because he's a great counselor when it comes to um, like life lessons and doing the shadow work as you talked about and dealing
Hmm.
with that trauma, etc. But he's also like the polydegmon, which means the receiver of many guests, which is connected to his Hades sphere. So he's multifaceted. And
Yes.
as you said, there's nothing scary about that. It's not just about the dead, it's about rebirth. It's about
Yes.
it's about giving birth to a new version of yourself after doing the inner work.
Yes. And I also love that he's also associated a lot of times with gardening and dirt, which obviously you can't grow anything without good dirt. And the underworld basically is anything that is below, which could be dirt or
Yes.
anything like that. So I love that correlation with him that, if you are looking for some way to grow in your practice, maybe reaching out to him to help you find the good dirt within you is a
Yes.
really great aspect of him. I mean, I could sit here and talk about Hades for like an hour straight, so but he's so wonderful. So that being said, I love that obviously you brought beautiful knowledge of Aphrodite and so many others as well. Now there's one thing that I would love to talk about, and that is the Greek Wheel of the Year
Mhm.
and how it differs from the Celtic one. Obviously, many of us as pagans, we all know the Celtic one and how it functions, but what is the difference between the two?
Great question. I also started from the Celtic one and worked on it for years, and I still do to a great degree because they work together.
Hmm.
So the wheels of the year, they have to do with geography and where people lived and how people understood the changing of the seasons. So it is local, it's based on the locality, it's based on the geography of each land. That's why it makes sense that different countries around the world would have a different wheel of the year. When it comes to ancient Greece, each city state had their own wheel of the year. So in Athens, for example, Attica, they had their wheel of the year. Here in Cyprus, we had a different wheel of the year. And in each place in Greece, they had their own wheel of the year. But essentially, it was the same changing of the seasons because it's a similar geographical area. But they just assigned different festivals and different gods to each changing of the season based on their own culture and their own understanding. But what the contemporary polytheists have done is they created a unified, a universal wheel of the year that we can all use to work together. So
Hmm.
the Greek wheel of the year, instead of having 8 festivals like the Celtic one, it has 12 festivals that still correlate with the Celtic one, by the way. So it starts in January and it ends in December. And there's one festival each month. So right now, where we're celebrating the summer solstice, we're also celebrating the summer solstice. It is the summer solstice, but at the same time, it's Hermea here in
Yes.
Cyprus. We celebrate Hermes, God Hermes. They're the bringer of the light, essentially, the god of ascension and enlightenment. Why? Because the solar light is at its maximum right now. So we have Apollo bringing in the solar light, and Hermes, who is the god of enlightenment, bringing in that spiritual light that we need. So it's very similar. You can follow either the Greek one or the Celtic one, and you'll get the same kind of thing. But with the Greek one, you get more specificity because it's 12 festivals. So you get to focus on specific changes of the season that are not captured in the Celtic Wheel of the Year. For example, in February, we celebrate Anthesteria, which is the beginning of the very beginning of spring.
Hmm.
And then in March, we celebrate the Asclepia in honor of Asclepius. That is the beginning of spring, which is essentially also the spring equinox.
Hmm.
So we have the very beginning of spring and then the beginning of spring. You can see
Yes.
we get more specific.
Yes. Also, I love that the different names that are obviously in, I would assume, Greek, and but they're just beautifully said the way that you said them. I'm just like, oh, those are so lovely the way that you're saying those. And obviously, me being American, I don't speak any of that language, but it's still beautiful to hear it. So I'm just kind of like fangirling over here just listening to that. That's so great. But that's so cool that there's obviously a different festival each month because, with the Celtic one, sometimes it's like there's a couple that are back to back, but obviously most of them are about 2 months apart each time. And so it's really exciting that you have something to look forward to each month to celebrate if you choose to. And
Yes,
that's
and on
really
top
cool.
of that, we have a god and goddess each month, a ruling god and the equivalent opposite gender, because we need to have balance between the masculine and the feminine energy. So right now, in the summer solstice, when we're recording this in June, we have Hermes with Hestia. So
Yes.
Hermes is the ruling god, but Hestia balances him out.
I love that. And so I think that is beautiful and wonderful. And if you're interested in the Greek Wheel of the Year, make sure you're checking in on that and seeing if that might be a good fit for you, or if you would choose to, maybe designing your own Wheel of the Year that works with you and your deities, because that's always a fun
Yeah, sure.
idea.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
so now kind of, getting close to the end of our time, what would be something that you would recommend to people that, if they were interested in having a daily practice, what would you recommend?
Okay, so in the book, I have like different levels of commitment when it comes to practice. I talk about altar work. I talk about how to do the festival, like the monthly festival every
Hmm.
single month, like step by step guidance. I have new moon and full moon rituals that people can use as well with the Orphic hymns that are ancient hymns. I have mantras, I have journal prompts, I have ways of connecting with the gods and goddesses out in nature. I have meditation journeys to like activate the gods' energy. So different levels of commitment. But if I could recommend like the most simple thing that someone can use to connect right here, right now, it's something that I wrote in the epilogue. So when I was finishing the book, I found myself in a tricky situation. I was trying to finish the book at the same time I was rehearsing for a Greek production of Mamma Mia. I was rehearsing for drama school exams. I was uh, launching a new course. I was trying to have a social life in the midst of that. And I was writing and advising people to do 3 rituals every single month: a new moon ritual, a full moon ritual, and the festival of the month.
Hmm.
And there I was, hadn't done a single ritual in 3 months. And I felt like such an imposter. So while feeling that way, I went back to my notes, the ones that I took in my priesthood training in 2017. I open it and I see a quote that I took a note from my teacher, who is the one I dedicated the book to as well. And he said that you don't need to do a ritual or to make an offering or to make a libation to know the gods. The gods are already here. You're already swimming in the ocean of the gods. It's just a matter of tuning in and realizing that. And that was such an awakening moment for me. It liberated me and it freed my guilt. And in that moment, I closed my eyes, I placed one hand on my heart, and I said, I am aware. And then I said, wake up. And the intention behind that was to become aware and wake up to my inner divinity and realize that the gods and goddesses are not outside of me, they're already within me. They're everywhere around me. A quote that a Greek philosopher said, I don't remember his name right now. Oh, yes, I think it's Thales of Miletus. He said that all things are gods, something like that, that essentially like the gods are within all things.
Hmm.
And that is true. It's an ocean of the gods and we're swimming in it.
It is. And I 100% love that quote. And apparently, I also needed to hear that quote because that was very moving. And everything that you had just described about the practice as well was something that personally, apparently, I needed some spiritual work today. Who knew that I was going to need it coming into an interview? But I love that that was the advice that you give to people, because obviously that's something that is so simple and so easy that you don't have to have the tools or the books or anything to
Yeah.
practice. You can just be you and be one with your deities, whoever they may be, and
Yeah.
experience that. And that's just a wonderful bit of advice that you really could give to people. So thank you for that, first of all. That's just wonderful. And
You know what? I'm all about starting small and
yes,
just growing like step by step. We don't need to go all in.
I completely agree with that. Absolutely. So since we are just about out of time, where can people find you on social media to connect with you? And also, where do you have any events coming up that people can come and connect with you, like book signings or conferences or
Yes.
anything like that? Um, Tell people all about that.
So you can find me on Instagram. That's where I live currently. It's at George Lizos. You can go to GreekMysticism.com to get all the details about the book and grab your free workshop to meet your patron god or goddess. And I am actually coming to the US for the first time.
Oh,
I'm so
lovely.
excited in September at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York. And I'm going to teach a 5-day certification course training people to become professional psychic healers. So I am so excited about that. And you can go to my website, georgelizos.com, to get all the information about it, or at the Omega website.
That is lovely. And I hope that you have a wonderful stay here in the US. I hope that your trip to New York is beautiful and exciting. And I hope that the conference goes beautifully, because it sounds wonderful. I wish I lived closer to New York. Otherwise, I would come and attend, but I am too far away. But
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Tegan.
yeah, absolutely. This has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom about everything. And you're going to have to come back if you write another book. Oh, that reminds me. Do you have any other books in the works that you would like to tease or talk about? And if you don't, that's perfectly okay as well.
Actually, in November, my next book comes out, and it's basically a sequel to Greek Secrets of Greek Mysticism.
Oh,
It's called
perfect.
Ancient Manifestation Secrets, and it draws on Hermetic philosophy, the 7 laws of the universe, and how to work with the 7 laws of the universe and your energy body to manifest. So it's a new manifestation method, all about working with the aura, the chakras, and the energy body, and bringing in like the gods and goddesses and the universal laws.
That sounds stunning. I cannot wait to hear all about that. Are you
I'll
publishing
send you a
it?
copy.
Oh, thank you. I was
Yeah.
gonna say, if you're publishing it with Wiser, I could absolutely request a copy with them as well.
So
But
this one is actually coming out with Inner Traditions.
oh, okay. I am not familiar with them, so yes, you would have to send me a copy.
Yeah,
But
I
I would
will.
love to have you back on the show to talk all about it and share more of your amazing wisdom at that time. So we will definitely have to talk about scheduling. And everyone else, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being a part of this show and helping it to continue to grow. I hope that you had such a wonderful time listening to us and this great conversation. But as always, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye, everyone.